Why you primarily do Republicans or only Republicans?
Only Republicans.
So if you could indicate why.
Well,
They
I grew
just
up.
spent-
I grew up that way.
Because they were at the DNC this morning.
Who'd you talk to? I have a bunch of friends over there.
Oh, let's see.
There's such a thing as a hip Republican, by the way.
Jane Thompson, Susan Bell.
Katie Buckland is who
Sounds
arranged
familiar.
it from.
I know
she's
more
California.
like Will Robinson and how did I get into it? I grew up in a political family. I grew up in a political family. My mother was an executive director in Delaware Republican politics, and I was just very much exposed to it all my life. Never wanted to do it for a living. My father was in advertising. Never wanted to do that for a living either. He was in advertising at a spot company. Got down here to school to study journalism.
This was at Maryland?
This was at American University. I thought I'll come to Washington and I'll be the great political journalist. I had some political background, but and I really did like politics. I just didn't ever want to get into it on either side. I wanted to be Ted Koppel when I got later. Went to school here, interned at the Republican National Committee after interning in a couple of television stations because I figured out after working in Philadelphia and a couple of television stations, I really liked television, so I was learning the edit process and things like that. So I went to the RNC because they had some facilities and I had some connections. And once I got there, the girl just above me, who was my intern coordinator and the production assistant, had a nervous breakdown. So she left.
Hopefully not related, right?
Not to me, hopefully. And she left, and I went home for my Christmas break and was done my internship. And the person who was above both of us, Barry Tron, who was the director of advertising, called and said, this is the Republican National Committee, called and said, you're the only one who knows this operation well enough to step into that job. We want you to take the job. And I said, no way, I want to finish school and get out as fast as I can. And they said, well, so they hung up the phone and they called back about an hour and a half later and said, well, we'll raise that offer by $2,000 and we'll guarantee you go to the national convention. And I said I wasn't negotiating. That sounds really good. So I will call my mom and talk to her about it. And they said, oh, no need. We already talked to her. She said it's fine. But you have to sign a contract. So I called my mother. I said, you talked to my mother? They said, yeah. I said, do you think I'm mature enough for the job, but you talk to my mommy first? And they said, yeah. So she's kind of a wheel. They all knew her pretty well. So I called my mom and she said, I think it's a good idea, but you have to guarantee me you're going to go back to school if you drop out. And I said, well, I promise. She said, no, I had Glenn, our lawyer, draw up a contract and it's going to be in the mail. You sign it and send it back and then you can say yes. So I did. And I had to have my bosses sign it. She was very serious. They had spent enough money on college at this point that they were not gonna have me dropping out and becoming a political hack. So I did. I worked shortly after I got there. The boss of that Barry moved up to the head of the division. The head of the division went on to another job, and I was director of advertising because there was no one else. So here I am, 20 years old, director of advertising at the Republican National Committee, and just like, well, sure, I'll do it. What are you gonna do? Send me back to school? So I kind of had a devil-may-care attitude, which helped me along because I didn't know how to do anything. And I basically, every time I got into a bind, called my friends at Channel 6 and said, okay, what is time code? Or how do you dub from VHS to 3/4 inch? Or what is color burst? And all these things. And I, skimmed through it and got exposed to so many people because in this business, it's the only thing where they can't send an aide to come do it. So even at the lowest levels, the important guys have to show up for the videotaping. And they can't just send someone, they can't have someone answer the questions. So my exposure to presidents and heads of state and senators and congressmen was immense. And I found a real liking to the things that the films that I was making, things like that. So along came, brilliant year, had a great time. Along came 1989, it was all over, and the contract reared its ugly head, and I was sent back to school and fired by my boss, just not because I did a bad job, but because those are the terms of the contract, and went back to AU. When I got out of school, finished AU in a little under a year, and when I got out of school, I started looking for jobs in journalism at $13,000 a year, and but simultaneously, all of my friends from the RNC had scattered to the 401s and were at all the agencies and everything, and were sending me boatloads of freelance work to get me over the hump until I found a job. Well, I was making about $30,000 in freelance work and looking for $13,000 a year jobs, so kind of sat down and thought, how does this equation work? I really want to be a journalist, but, you know, I'm wealthy, so I'm going to call it a business. I put out a shingle, and I was lucky enough to have free office space from a couple of folks who had left the RNC around the same time I did, a lot older, had a lot of guardian angels in the business, and spent a couple of years in my own business and made a living, freelancing for other media consultants, and then along came 1992, and the NRCC was looking for a senior producer. I'd had a bunch of experience at that point, so they called me in and said, we'll pick up your, whatever you make freelancing, we'll pick up your tab if you come work for us for the year. And so I exclusively consulted with them for a year, basically, and did all international advertising, and met a boatload more people. And then last year, or 2 years ago, Tom Colt, who was the executive director of the NRCC, went back to his home state of Oklahoma, and I went off to make a documentary about the 5 living ex-presidents, which never quite got off the ground. But in the middle of that, he called and said, do you want to do your own campaign? So I'm a consultant. I said, no, I really don't. I'm not prepared for that. He said, I think you are, but he said, I want you to come pitch a race. I don't think you have a chance, but I'd like you to come pitch. So I went and pitched the governor's race out in Oklahoma after I called all my friends and said, okay, how do you pitch a race? And what does a consultant really do beyond the production of the ads? And learned all that, and I went and pitched the race, and the governor and I fell in love with each other. He was just an amazing, exciting little guy, and I was, you know, we just were enamored with each other, and I thought I can do this, and didn't think I had a chance at getting it, but I came home and was almost out of money, down to like the last $8 that I had in the whole world. And luckily my roommate here owns the house, so he's pretty nice about the rent, so that was due, but not necessarily. And it was Thanksgiving, and didn't think I was gonna be able to drive up to Delaware for Thanksgiving, send in the money for gas. So I went to the grocery store to spend my last $8 on food, and you know, got dog food, and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to go look for a job next week. And that's the end of Alphouse production. And I bought a lottery ticket with my last buck, won $50. So I thought, cool, gas, and I went up to Delaware and thought I'll just put it off until after the holidays. And then when I was home over that break, I got a call from Oklahoma, and they said, you got the job, the checks in the mail, the signing checks in the mail. And out of the dust, the phoenix rose again. And I had one of the most amazing years of my career. It just set a snowball off, and I guess I'm a political advertising consultant now. I never expected to be. Along the way, I worked for Ted Koppel for a while and a couple other places, but my heart's still in documentaries. Hopefully, they're harder than commercials to get work, but hopefully I'll get this one funded and this will start this process off. But looks like I'm in political advertising for a little while. The reel is kind of self-explanatory. It's kind of documentary style, so I'll let it play, and then I'll run up and let my dog get to it and shut up. And then we can go back and look at any spot that you want. But it pretty much.
Okay, tell you. Hey, Banner. Well, I thought I would just make a statement.
My theory on producing ads this cycle was to stay focused on the candidate. You must know everything there is to know first about your candidate. Everything.
I don't think we should do a Q&A. You want to do Q&A?
I think we did it because Kim was very open-minded.
You need to know his shoe size, how big his head is, whether he was, you know, the kid last picked in the kickball team. How does he feel about eggs?
Kim was able to get to know me.
A cookie cutter ad campaign doesn't work.
Discouraging.
They were definitely J.C. Wise.
My emotional connection with my clients helps me to make that emotional connection. So how can there be a formula for political ads about people?
who I thought did an excellent job in articulating, the feel and the moment of who J.C. Watts is. What do you want to say here?
What amazed me was she wasn't from Oklahoma, but she quickly understood Oklahoma, quickly.
And to get there, I had to spend a lot of time in Oklahoma. I'm definitely not from Oklahoma.
And that is something I've never seen. The ability to move into a state, to absorb the culture of that state and put it on film.
I have my own 7-Eleven and dry cleaner there, so I guess I'm an unofficial Oklahoman now.
That's a very remarkable, very difficult thing to do.
I can make strong recommendations, give strong grades concerning the time that she spent with her campaign.
Still turning.
Action. Never work with animals. The people I've worked for, I've been lucky enough to really admire and look up to.
I never saw from day one something that was out here that wasn't good. There was a lot of sniping from radios at first, but the results spoke for themselves.
I had Republicans, Democrats, black, white, male, female, saying that they really did like the ads. And I don't think they were saying that just to say it.
See, this is where my paycheck comes
That wallet is empty, and the only way it's going to be full is if you, yes, you all of you, will write your check, your friendly check.
You determine the
They goof around a
success
lot.
or how well
It's the best
you
part of it.
perform by looking at the statistics.
We didn't miss on anything. Didn't miss on one spot.
Kim's statistics, they're pretty sound.
I would not have won if it weren't for Kim. That is a flat, unadulterated, uncompromising statement as far as I'm concerned. And I'll always be grateful to her.
Okay? That gets retributed, I think.
J.C. Watts is incredibly inspiring to be around. He is nothing that you would expect, and still he blows you away when you meet him.
I just had a feeling in my heart what I needed and what I wanted.
Immediately when I met J.C. Watts, I was drawn in by his kind of emotional energy.
After I met Kim, I just kind of thought, there was something different about her. She not from Oklahoma, but yet she's got a warm feel about her.
I got goosebumps when I heard him speak at times.
We decided to use her and was just very delighted with our results. When I first ran for public office in 1990, our survey showed that you ask people these open-ended questions about J.C. Watts, and they remembered me as a football player at the University of Oklahoma, quarterback, University of Oklahoma, Orange Bowl victories. But I've worked very hard to be more than just an athlete. I've worked hard in my business and to be a good father, to be a good husband, and to be a good youth minister. So I worked hard on other things, and I wanted people to see that, and I think they did.
J.C. Watts has always made a difference in our lives. He's given us the pride that comes with victory. He's led us with conviction and faith. He's served us with honor and distinction. And he takes the time to care. Most of all, he inspires us to believe in ourselves. That's why J.C. Watts has always been a leader. That's why J.C. Watts has always made a difference. J.C. Watts, Congress, making a difference in our lives.
My infamous afro ad where he made fun of my afro, and
This is
I was offended because I worked so hard on that afro.
That's
and
the
I was
opponent's
so proud of that.
spot.
He made fun of it.
It was a pretty
That was his
horrible ad.
entry
It was-
into the
So the afro
campaign.
versus the
I
little
think
farmer
what he
there?
was trying to
Yeah, he was
accomplish
trying to make it a black-white
I don't know, maybe get some
race
radical
and
view
make him think he
of
was
who J.C.
dangerous
Watts
because he was black.
I
And the
think he
district
said
was only,
that
it's only about a
filed
percentage,
bankruptcy and I
about
had
7%
been sued
black
9
population
different
in
times
the city.
and just, I mean,
And in
just
the
a
district.
total manipulation of the
So we
facts.
spent the whole
But JC was
campaign
running at the taxpayer's expense. Well,
fighting these ads that talked about him being, not only being a black man, but being a, what they wanted people to believe was a deadbeat black man, which means just because he's
And
black,
I
it's
expressed
obvious
to
that his
Kim that,
financial
look,
dealings are
I
not
want a
on the up and
rebuttal.
up.
Right.
So we hit him
I
back
want the
hard a
facts.
couple of times,
I
and then we
want
answered.
everything documented.
Then we answered
And
from
we
inside
documented
what we
everything
thought,
in terms
the
of what
truth
he had
about
said,
his
about
financial
where he
background
stood
and
on
what he did
issues.
and why he had trouble.
And we did a rebuttal ad with it.
We did a
And that
couple of
too was
different
very
spots.
effective.
David Perryman will do or say
Yes, we
anything
called
to
him a
get
schmuck.
elected. Perryman is attacking J.C. Watts to hide from his liberal record. The truth is, Perryman said he would have voted for the Clinton tax plan, hiking taxes on Social Security, small businesses, and middle-class families. The truth is, Perryman opposed Oklahoma term limits laws, and Perryman doesn't want you to know he had his NRA grade fixed because he got it wrong the first time. The truth is, with David Perryman, it's hard to know what to believe.
So I think
First,
it's
we
important to
We
answer
defined ourselves as the conservative, him as the liberal,
his
and,
negative
which is
ads,
important because they're very
with
conservative,
the contrast.
and called him a
talking
liar,
about his
basically,
record, where he stood on issues.
which is true.
But at the same time, we didn't want to be so combative.
We were nice, though.
We wanted to kind of buffer that
Simultaneous.
with the conservative piece.
You do feel that you have to answer these ads when they make
Sometimes,
Balance
sometimes you
that
just
very well.
don't, but this was
I
particularly
think J.C.
damaging, because
Watts
we wanted,
has great
J.C. Watts
insight,
was black, and
common
we couldn't get
sense,
around that, and it
Oklahoma
was a problem,
values,
there was racism.
and I know that he's
We had to show
effective,
that he was
I know he's
articulate and that he was the
articulate, I know he's a
conservative,
good,
because it was more
proven,
important.
positive, conservative
Because I
leader.
did a couple races with Tom Bradley, and the race issue would always come up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it depends on the
They
race,
agree with me.
and
They agree with the
the
balanced
people
budget.
involved.
Yeah.
I
They
mean,
want a strong national defense.
he's much more
They
than a black
want welfare
athlete.
reform.
Right.
He's
Their
one of the most
values
articulate
are my
people
values.
you'd ever meet.
I believe
And
those
he's
values
smarter
make
than the
sense.
whip, and he's, you know,
And I thought,
and if you just see him,
he,
and you do have racist
a guy who had
thoughts,
had a
you
chance
think
to,
he is. He's a pretty,
and that's
he's
my
pretty
favorite,
typically black.
because I
He's
think it's
really
someone
huge.
that had
I
a
mean, he's a
chance
football
Typical
player.
black
He's
athlete.
scary.
in
You
some
know,
very
we had to
difficult times,
we had to
and-
put him
and
not
I think
with
probably has
young
a good
children, not
deal
with
of
smaller
character
females,
integrity
unless they were
J.C.
with their
Watts
husbands. I
more
mean,
than
there's a lot of
anyone
things that
on
we had
the
to
face
do
of the earth
because
outside of my
there's a
wife.
huge barrier to the state.
I thought
and,
that said it very well, and I
This
really
spot
think
was the one that really
that spot
won the
was
race.
probably
I mean,
the
this was
difference maker.
his minister telling the truth
I
about what
believe
had
in
gone
J.C.
on.
Watts. He's a man of his word. He's a man of integrity. David Perryman's ad seems to imply that J.C. is financially irresponsible. Let me tell you the truth. After the oil bust, J.C. could have declared bankruptcy. He could have bailed out. But he chose to step up to his responsibility and fulfill his obligations. Not because it was easy, but it was the right thing to do. That's J.C.'s way. Perryman seems to think that keeping the word is optional. But I know J.C. Watts. To him, the right way is the only way.
I think you hired
We
good
just,
people.
we established
And
with that
you let
ad,
them perform.
the radio ad
You
was a
know
little
what
bit more
you want,
extensive
you know
work. That was done in the last
what
few
needs
days of the
to be
campaign.
done,
We
and,
just weren't getting to him
you know,
on,
Jim was that
they
person for me
believed he
in
was the
that area.
conservative, they believed he was able, but they still thought that he was
I
a
walked up to this
shyster.
table, I said, is this
And,
the Republican Women's Club of
Austin's
Kay
saying-
County? This lady looked up, she said, yeah.
The Keating race is textbook. We started from the beginning and built his story until the end. The Watts race was cut, Perry, you know, it was back and forth, back and forth. And they hit us right away. They started that negative ad on our financial troubles right away, like 6 weeks out. And that was a very early spot. We fought back with, he's a liar, we're the conservative. We tried to establish it on conservative, liberal, honest, dishonest, and it still wasn't working. So towards the end of the campaign, they believed we were conservative, but they didn't trust us. And so I thought, how do we get around the fact that they still don't believe what we're saying about our financial data? And when the truth was, quite simply, everybody lost money in the oil bust. Everybody in Oklahoma lost money in the oil bust. The truth was, so did JC. There's two choices. You declare bankruptcy, and your slate's wiped clean, and everybody who you owe money to is screwed. Or you get out a loan, you pay back the folks that you borrowed money from, you pay back your debts, and then you pay them off over a long period of time. JC did that. Instead of declaring bankruptcy, he decided to pay off his debts. You know, he says, my daddy told me I never leave $1 owed to anybody. So he took his debts, consolidated them into a couple of loans, and started paid back all the people and started paying off the loans. But a lot of banks were going under in Oklahoma. So the loans had transferred in so many different places, from closing banks and through that whole time in Oklahoma when nothing was real stable. And it looks like, if you go through the record, it can be manipulated to the fact that there's liens against the loans, when it's liens against the bank who held the loans, who transferred them to the other banks, but it all goes into each loan. It's very complicated. Obviously, they had spun it one way, and we were saying, you know, they're not lying, but they're not telling the truth. So how do we get to the whole truth? Finally, I just said, look, everybody lost money in the oil bust. Who do people believe? We need to get someone. I said, we get his mother. No, it's too cute. Do we get his wife? No, people aren't going to listen to his wife. So who do we get? And I said, we get his minister, who had helped us with a number of other things during the campaign. And his minister, that guy, Jerry Don Abernathy, had cut a couple other spots for us, which we didn't use, but he was a former television evangelist in Dallas, so he was able to lay out a script like no one I'd ever seen, and we just said, I sat down with JC and said, tell me the truth, and he said, the bottom line is I could have done one thing and I didn't. I did the harder thing, and I'm getting screwed because of it. And I said, well, all right, I'll write the spot. So I wrote the spot, and he delivered my lines and made them sound like they were some of the best writing I think I've ever done. But he was just an amazing.
I think the fact that he's a white minister, and he also the fact that, as you said, to me the most believable thing is he could have taken bankruptcy. 99% of the American people, I think, basically took bankruptcy.
And everybody in Oklahoma, it was like a light bulb, because our numbers were shaky up until then. It was like a light bulb. They said, yeah, that's true. Either we did take bankruptcy, or yeah, we're going through that exact thing. And it took a long time to get to that, and I wish we'd have come up with it earlier. But I think it turned a race around for us. The Keating race, which you're about to see, was textbook from start to finish. It was, in that race, that was a reactive race. It was kind of, what do we do about this? How do we answer this? And we didn't really get to build up the incredible guy that J.C. Watts was. In the Keating race, it was, let me tell you about Frank Keating, and then just building blocks until by the end of the campaign, it was like a documentary on Frank Keating's life. I mean, first was the bio spot, and then the issue spots, and then the family, and then the conservative piece, and then the a couple of negative ads against the other guys, and then it really was textbook. I use this in Romania because in defining a candidate, it was probably one of the
What about the other candidates? Did you go through the same thing? Did you have bankruptcy?
No, the other guy just was kind of slippery. He never really committed on anything. He didn't have anything illegal in his background. Those ads that we did, and the negative ads in the Keating race that we did, really are the result of incredible research. You don't usually find a smoking gun in campaigns. Most candidates haven't slept with sheep. Most candidates haven't, been in jail. Most candidates don't have, illegitimate children around. They're generally pretty decent guys. In the Keating race, you'll see, but we were able to take in both races inconsistencies with what they were saying, and point them out. And I think it's legitimate negative advertising. It's not personal. It is, you're saying one thing, but you're doing another thing. Or there's a pattern of this kind of thought. And the question we're going to ask you is that the kind of thought you want in your governor? Is this guy said one thing on gun control, and he did another, and he failed the NRA's gun control, test the first time, and then when he realized it wasn't politically expedient, had some people fix it for him, got it changed. Is that, do you want a guy that's going to be that easily, is going to manipulate the system just so that he says the right thing at the right time? Do you want someone who's free thinking and really thinks these things deeply and would always answer that way? We just kind of took a few inconsistencies, and you saw in the Perryman, he had said one thing and then another in 5 or 6 different instances, and that's what we used against him. It wasn't necessarily that each thing that he did was horrible. It was that was a pattern of being slippery, slick. In the Keating race, we ran against 2 guys. The first thing we had to do was be the conservative. The second thing we had to do was the governor before Governor Keating was indicted and on 9 charges of taking illegal campaign donations, federal offenses, and he got them all bumped down to misdemeanors and was only charged with 1 misdemeanor, and everybody was very, very mad. But Jack Mildren, the guy we were running against, was his lieutenant governor. They ran separately, were elected separately, but they happened to be from the same party, and Jack Mildren just never spoke out against the sitting governor because he was in a catch-22. He couldn't, so he used it against him. It's not personal, it's just happened to be the way it worked out. And you'll see in the negative ads that he did a few things that Oklahoma had been burned once by a guy who pushed the edges of legitimacy. and then went over the line. We were saying that, you know, there's a chance that this guy's gonna do the same thing. He hasn't done anything wrong yet, but he's done these 3 things, which are indicators to us that he may just. And do you want to risk that again? And that was devastating. The guy flipped out when we played the ad. He was so mad. And I think he was mad because it was effective, you know.
Did you do J.C. Watts first, and that's why Keating called you up afterwards, or vice versa?
No, vice versa. I got Keating on that fluke, and the Watts race, congressional races traditionally start a few months
Well, I
later.
knew from that point
And,
forward I had a long way to go.
He just is so chance. And I said, well, I don't care. I really dig him. He's a great
What
guy.
needs to be
And so
done,
Steve
and
Largent was a surefire winner.
Kim was that
And I
person
didn't take
for
that
me
one
in that
since I had the
area.
governor's race. So I took him, and he was
I walked
amazing.
up to this table. I said, is this the Republican Women's Club of King County? This lady looked up. She said, yes. Are you the caterer? Well, I knew from that point forward I had a long way to go.
He just is one of the best candidates. It's true. He started at 7% in the polls against a field of 5 primary guys.
Day by day.
The next one was 29%, so we were.
The race was kind of a pleasure because he did most of the work himself.
She provided the focus, she provided the discipline, the creativity, the ingenuity.
And he was just really fun to work with.
Oh, you want to get serious? Okay. I had been out of Oklahoma for 7.5 years. I wasn't by any means the head of the pack. We had a very popular Democratic lieutenant governor who was a great football star. We had an independent congressman who spoke to the populous rural element in Oklahoma. Well, people wanted to know that their governor was a good person because the preceding governor, the incumbent at the time, was convicted in office. People were very cynical about politics. So to emphasize integrity, family, background, was a very important point. And a good man, great governor spot was the first spot we ran. Moved numbers dramatically. People really believed the spot.
People across Oklahoma are getting to know Frank Keating,
I think Frank Keating's just a good man.
a former FBI agent who believes in Oklahoma values. He will stand up for what's right.
He believes in things I do, like our families.
An Oklahoma called to service by Presidents Reagan and Bush.
He was in charge of all the U.S. attorneys, U.S. Marshals, the Secret Service.
Frank Keating is dedicated to protecting our Oklahoma way of life.
We need a governor like Frank Keating.
Frank Keating, a good man, a great governor.
Well, I had defined a message, ONE, Opportunity Neighborhood Education. So the opportunity piece was tax cut, regulatory relief. Neighborhood was crime, welfare reform, education, of course, education. So what Kim did was package the 3 messages in 3 separate spots. We had 30-second spots. Each of these messages crisply had to be presented. What was amusing to me was during the campaign, people knew all about the agenda, how it was presented, what I was standing for.
Frank Keating, a candidate for governor with a plan for Oklahoma's future.
Well, Frank wants to eliminate income tax for seniors.
The thing on these is not necessarily, it's not important what he's talking about. He thought it was, but all I wanted to show and what our polling was showing is that he was articulate, he knew the details of issues, and that he had a plan. That's why when you see on the screen the Keating plan stays up there the whole time in this whole series of ads, it really doesn't matter what he's saying. He just has to look like he knows what he's talking about, and that he's got the plan, and that he's the first one out of the bag with it, which was important.
And one of America's top law enforcement officers.
Frank Keating believes in truth in sentencing.
Career criminals
The truth is
serve
you
their
can't-
full sentences.
You can't talk about the details of
And
issues
I'm
on
really
TV
worried
anyway. We
about
had,
the dangerous
a
criminals
30-page document
The system is
that
wrong.
he
There
would
should be
carry
no
around with him,
charge
that
for
people who
fraud.
really wanted to know about the
Behind
specifics
bars,
of the
they keep
issues
them there.
would read. But on TV, we just wanted to be the one guy who had the plan, and there was a few key things in each one that tipped off people who are interested, but you can't really talk about
Well,
the issues
Frank
on
believes
TV.
the parents should choose which public schools their kids attend. And he wants to support our teachers.
I'd like to pay our teachers more than the education bureaucracy. And I propose dollar-for-dollar tax credits for teachers who seek higher degrees.
I like that Frank Keating is thinking about our future.
The other aspect of these is, the other guy that we were running against, one was a stutterer, and the other one was a football player. And what we were trying to do in the J.C. Watts side, we were trying to do against in the
She was
Keating
able to
race.
give me
He's
stature
the
by doing
intellect
something
in the
that I
race.
think
Jack
most
Mildred's a
consultants
great
wouldn't
guy,
want
very
to
nice
do,
guy,
and
but
that
he's
is
not
to
that
bring
bright.
George Bush
We wanted
back
Frank
to
Keating to be the intellect in the race.
It was a calculated risk to bring back someone who had lost the election, namely George Bush, to help somebody who had spent too much time in Washington anyway, named Frank Keating.
3 separate ads.
But the way it was packaged,
They
the way
ran
it was
simultaneously,
scripted,
but not together.
was extremely persuasive. That spot turned Washington into an absolute asset, not a liability.
Integrity, honesty, a commitment to doing what's right. That's what I saw in Frank Keating and President Reagan before me. And that's why we asked